The LSAT has changed. For the first time in over 30 years, the LSAT will not have the logic game section. Starting in August, they're replacing it with a second scored logical reasoning section, which raises the question, will the August LSAT be harder? Will the logical reasoning in particular be harder? Today, I'll walk you through the recent changes and what they mean for you. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, the LSAT has undergone a number of different minor changes over the years, such as the inclusion of rule substitution questions in logic games, the inclusion of the dual or comparative reading comprehension passages in Reading Comp starting in June 2007. But the biggest change is starting this fall, August 2024. LSAC is replacing the logic game section with a second scored logical reasoning section going forward. For those who aren't aware, LSAC was sued by some blind test takers who contended they were at an unfair disadvantage because they couldn't benefit from diagramming the way that other test takers could. LSAC fought them, but ultimately settled the lawsuit and agreed to develop a new version of the test without the then current logic games section. And they said, you know what? We're not going to replace the logic games. We're just removing them entirely and adding more of what we already know works, namely a second scored logical reasoning section. Now, for what it's worth, LSAC has said on their end, they are not looking to make the LSAT harder. They are not introducing any radical new type of question on the LSAT. They're just adding more of what has always been on the LSAT, another section of logical reasoning. However, indications, reports from students who took the LSAT going back several months, even back to November, have been indicating that LSAC is testing out logical reasoning sections containing more questions involving quantitative reasoning, meaning questions involving formal logic, numbers versus percentages, absolute versus relative values, meaning that because LSAC is not testing these concepts in the logic game section anymore, because there isn't going to be a logic game section anymore, it could be that LSAC will include an increased proportion of questions of these types in logical reasoning starting in August. Now, this is, again, not going to be some radically new question type. These questions have always been on the LSAT going back to 1991, but we may see more of them on the test, meaning it might be a good idea for you to give these questions a little bit more attention than you otherwise would have. LSAC is testing your ability to recognize that a large percentage could still be a very small number, and a large number could still be a very small percentage. So, for example, if we were to say that there are tens of thousands of people taking the LSAT this year, you might think to yourself, tens of thousands sounds like a lot of people. Could fill an entire auditorium, for example, could fill a whole football stadium maybe, but that is still a small percentage of the population of the United States of over 300 million, or the population of the world of over 8 billion, right? So tens of thousands might sound big if you're talking about a small town, but it sounds insignificant if you're talking about the population of the entire world. So LSAC is looking to test your ability to recognize these nuances, these distinctions, and the fact that a large number may not actually be a large percentage, and vice versa. And so work on these going forward. This does not mean the LSAT is going to be harder, or that logical reasoning in particular will be harder, unless, of course, you don't like math, in which case you personally may want to brush up on these concepts. Now, we have gotten reports that students who took the April LSAT, those who took the June LSAT, their official LSAT scores in many cases came back lower than they were expecting. Of course, those posting on Reddit are a self-selecting group. It may be an unrepresentative sample, but it could also be that LSAC is looking to dampen down some of the recent LSAT score inflation. LSAT scores have been increasing across the board over the past several years, in part due to the temporary LSAT flex format, and then more recently, due to the fact that LSAC has become a lot more liberal in granting accommodations for things like extra time. And so LSAC could be adjusting the raw score conversions to reduce some of the folks getting astronomically high LSAT scores, just that medians don't increase too much. They do want to maintain their percentiles where possible, because percentiles have been changing. It used to be that you had to get a 173 to score in the 99th percentile. Now you need to get a 175 to score in the 99th percentile. So they don't want it to get to the point where you got to get a 177 or a 178 to get that same 99th percentile. That could be what's going on, which could mean that the raw score conversions are changing over time. We'll see what happens when the next data gets released. But in the meantime, keep studying. If you'd like my help, of course, you could check out the links below to book a call, with me, my team. And in the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.